Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a compound that, well, it's honestly been unfairly boxed into a corner for decades. For the longest time, it's been viewed almost exclusively as just some generic gym supplement, meant only for bodybuilders trying to add an extra inch to their biceps. But when we actually look at the clinical data and the underlying systems biology, a completely different picture emerges. We're going to explore creatine today, not as a mere muscle builder, but as a rigorously studied foundational compound for total cellular optimization, neuroprotection, and overall longevity.
Okay, let's dive into this, because we really need to completely reframe our expectations right off the bat. You might be wondering, is creatine just a muscle builder or is it a foundational longevity compound? Well, the clinical data gives us a resounding no to the first part and a massive definitive yes to the second. The latest research we're covering today totally shifts the spotlight away from those outdated meathead stereotypes and shines a bright light on clinical applications. We're talking about things like traumatic brain injury recovery, fighting off the effects of sleep deprivation, and keeping aging populations strong and independent. We are literally talking about fundamentally upgrading the energy infrastructure of your entire body.
So here's our agenda for today's explainer. First, the cellular energy buffer. Second, total body optimization. Third, choosing the right form. Fourth, clinical dosing protocols. And finally, debunking outdated myths.
Section 1. The cellular energy buffer. Let's look at the microscopic mechanics of how this actually works.
A lot of people don't realize that your body is already in the business of making creatine. It's a completely naturally occurring compound synthesized right inside you. Step 1 happens in your kidneys, where two amino acids, arginine and glycine, are combined to form guanidinoacetate, which, by the way, is just a fantastic word for Scrabble. Then in step 2, the liver takes over, methylating that compound to produce creatine. Your body naturally pumps out between 1 to 2 grams of this every single day, depending on your size. Once it's synthesized or absorbed from your diet, mostly from things like red meat and fish, it's stored primarily in your skeletal muscle. But, and this is absolutely crucial, it's also stored in your brain tissue and your smooth muscle.
So what is it actually doing while it's just sitting there in those tissues? Well, it's stored as something called phosphocreatine. Think of this like an elite microscopic energy buffer. Whenever you do intense activity, whether that's a heavy deadlift, a full-out sprint, or even really intense cognitive processing, your body burns ATP as its primary energy source. Phosphocreatine steps in and generously donates its phosphate group to rapidly regenerate that ATP. This is the exact biological system that powers explosive movements, high-intensity interval training, and heavy resistance training. It actively prevents cellular fatigue. It literally buys you more time and more capacity before exhaustion sets in.
Moving on to Section 2, Total Body Optimization. Let's scale up and look at the macro level.
Let's see how this microscopic buffering cascades across the entire human system. We already touched on ATP regeneration, right? That's what dramatically improves your power output and your recovery. But then we have cell volumization. Creatine literally pulls water into your cells, keeping them highly hydrated. And that physical stretch on the cell wall, it acts as a mild anabolic signal to actually grow muscle. Add to that enhanced glycogen storage, better blood sugar control by driving glucose directly into the muscle cells, and satellite cell activation, which completely supercharges muscle repair. All of this improved training capacity simply means you can generate more mechanical tension, which leads to a highly robust hypertrophy stimulus. It's an incredible chain reaction. But wait, it doesn't just stop at the neck. The neuroprotective effects of creatine are honestly absolutely fascinating, because your brain stores creatine too. Supplementing it directly enhances brain energy metabolism. And what does that mean for you? It means significantly improved working memory and cognitive resilience when you are under severe stress, especially, and this is huge, when you are sleep deprived. Furthermore, there are incredibly promising, albeit mild at this stage, clinical benefits being observed in patients dealing with traumatic brain injuries, like football or rugby players, as well as those managing Parkinson's and depression. It's basically providing a much larger energy pool for a stressed brain to draw from. I really love this quote from the source material because it hits the nail on the head regarding who stands to benefit the most here. If you follow extreme diets, say if you're vegan or vegetarian, you naturally have lower baseline levels of creatine because you just aren't eating meat. So you're going to see a massive, robust baseline improvement when you start supplementing. But equally, clinical populations like the elderly or the chronically ill profoundly benefit. We aren't talking about winning a bodybuilding stage here, folks. We are talking about life-extending, functional strength gains that make a person significantly less frail and vastly more independent in their later years.
Section 3. Choosing the right form. Let's cut through all the marketing noise.
Now, what's really interesting about this is that if you walk into any supplement store, the marketing noise is just deafening. There are dozens of flashy variations claiming to be the next big breakthrough in muscle science. But the clinical evidence is remarkably clear. Creatine monohydrate remains the undisputed gold standard. It's the most studied, it has the absolute best safety data, and it happens to be the cheapest. Next down the line is HCl, arguably the second best. It does have better solubility in water and typically requires a slightly lower 3-gram dose, often sold in capsules. But then you have buffered creatine and ethyl ester. They are heavily marketed as superior or claiming to cause less bloating. The clinical evidence, though, it shows no meaningful difference for buffered, and ethyl ester has essentially lost the battle in every single study it's ever been in. Bottom line, stick to the classic monohydrate.
Section 4, Clinical Dosing Protocols. How to actually optimize your biology.
Our goal here is actually pretty simple. Most people have an average muscle creatine baseline of about 120 millimoles per kilogram of dry muscle weight, but we want to target the upper cellular saturation limit, which sits right around 160. Consistent daily dosing is what safely raises that baseline to peak saturation. And here's a fantastic pro tip straight from the data. If you co-ingest your creatine with a bit of protein and carbohydrates, the resulting natural insulin spike actually acts as a shuttle. It significantly enhances the cellular uptake of the creatine. It's a great little hack.
So what are the exact regimens we should be looking at? The standard, highly effective dose is simply 5 grams of monohydrate or 3 grams of HCl every single day. Now, some people recommend an optional loading phase of 10 to 20 grams a day for the first 7 days. And while this absolutely speeds up the time it takes to reach that saturation level we just talked about, I do have to warn you. If you have sensitive digestion, slamming that much creatine all at once might cause some unnecessary GI upset or a bit of a tummy ache. And regarding timing, honestly, whether you take it morning, noon, or night really doesn't matter. Daily consistency is literally the only thing that matters to maintain that saturation.
Now, just to manage your expectations, 1 to 3 kilograms. That is the entirely normal amount of water weight gain you can expect in the first 1 to 2 weeks of supplementation. I want to be super clear, this is not fat. This is proof that the cellular volumization mechanism is actively working. It's actively pulling water into your muscle tissues, hydrating them, and setting the stage for better overall performance.
Section 5, Debunking Outdated Myths. Let's put bro science up against the actual data.
So, the crucial point here is a clinical nuance that you absolutely must understand. Creatine is the incredibly safe, natural energy buffer we've been discussing this whole time. However, during normal bodily turnover, it naturally converts into a byproduct called creatinine. Now, creatinine is a very standard biomarker that doctors test to evaluate your kidney health. If you're supplementing creatine, you will naturally produce more creatinine, which can falsely elevate your blood test reading. It makes it look like you have a renal injury when your kidneys are actually perfectly healthy. So if you or your doctor are ever concerned about a false positive reading on a blood test, the clinical advice is super simple. Just stop supplementation for at least a month, retest, and you'll see those levels drop right back down to your baseline.
All right, let's rapidly clear out the rest of the garbage myths. First off, creatine is absolutely not a steroid. It is not hormonal in any way, shape, or form. There is zero evidence of it causing kidney or liver damage in healthy users. And what about that widespread fear about hair loss? Well, the link is entirely indirect via mild DHT elevations, not causative. Honestly, if you were going to go bald, it was going to happen anyway. Creatine isn't causing it, it doesn't cause fat gain, and you do not need to cycle on and off it. You know, it's actually profoundly ironic that society just easily accepts the devastating, proven toxicity of alcohol on the brain, liver, and kidneys as totally normal, while simultaneously harboring these completely baseless fears about one of the most thoroughly studied, clinically safe compounds on Earth.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer today and to a highly provocative question. Knowing what you know now about ATP buffering, neuroprotection, and functional longevity, are you leaving cellular energy and cognitive resilience on the table? This isn't just about the gym anymore. It's about optimizing the fundamental architecture of human health span. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredible material, and I really hope this empowers you to think, test, and optimize your own biology.